before the selection of concubines for the Eastern Palace. I was poisoned and lost my virginity to the guard you.Then in an alley. I believed you.Then had saved my life and accepted my fate to marry into the you.Then family. After marriage, with my support, you.Then achieved great success and fame. On the day he was granted the title of general, a beggar came to our door, brazenly declaring, "I am the lover who slept with the general's wife before her marriage." I ordered you.Then to drive them away. But he laughed cruelly. "It wasn't me who humiliated you in the alley back then, it was these 3 beggars. I was just picking up a corpse that day, and never expected to gain such wealth and honor." Upon learning the truth, I was consumed by rage, pulled out my hairpin, and tried to kill him, but he pushed me off the platform. In agony, I saw myself surrounded by those beggars, while you.Then embraced his young lover and watched coldly. I died with hatred in my heart. Chapter 1. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn back to the night I was drugged. I was in a narrow alley, my body burning with fever. Realizing I had been reborn, I immediately pulled out my hairpin and stabbed it into my thigh with all my strength. The poison in my body was called immortal lust. Once it took effect, even a god with no desires would become a slave to primal urges. Only excruciating pain could keep me briefly conscious. Otherwise, I would end up like in my previous life, collapsing in the alley, unable to tell whether those who were humiliating me were human or demon. My blurred vision finally cleared. In the night breeze, I keenly caught another sound, the suppressed breathing of a man. In my previous life, after I was raped, I fainted in the alley, covered in blood and filth. It was Shin, the gatekeeper of the Shin family, who found me first. He carried me, half naked and in a pitiful state, through the streets, past the crowd, and back to the Shin household. By the time we arrived, the entire capital knew that Shin Qingji, the only daughter of the imperial merchant Shin family, had engaged in illicit relations with the household guard in an alley the previous night. Before that night, I had been a strong contender for the position of crown princess. After that night, I became a slut who had an affair with a servant. During that time, a piece of white silk was always laid out on the table in my bedroom. I constantly thought of taking my own life to preserve my family's reputation. That was the darkest period of my life. Until one day, Prince Peiyuan suddenly arrived with a court physician. He pushed open the door, letting in a ray of sunlight that had been absent for so long, blinding my eyes, which were almost swollen shut from crying. Prince Peiyuan asked me, "Did you see me that night?" I was so ashamed that I bowed my head respectfully through the layers of curtains, remembering the proper etiquette between a subject and her ruler. "Your Highness is of noble birth, this humble maiden has never seen you before and dares not claim to know you." Through the curtains, I seemed to hear the prince sigh softly. "Take care of yourself, young lady. A woman's virtue does not lie beneath her skirt, do not belittle yourself." The crown prince took the white silk from the table and left the court physician to tend to my health. At the time, I only thought the crown prince was kind-hearted. Later, I learned that on that very night, the crown prince had also been poisoned with a drug, and had endured a sleepless night in that alley. He heard that the daughter of the Shin family had been defiled in the same alley and suspected that it was his mistake. So he specially visited the Shin family to seek an answer. He heard about my distress that day on the street and even brought a renowned gynecologist from the imperial hospital. After repeated verification, he finally confirmed that it was not him that night. Now, I stare at the pile of firewood before me. The humiliation of my past life is vividly etched in my memory. I cannot recall the faces of those men, but I clearly remember being forced onto a pile of wood and brutalized. Before those 3 beggars and you.Then arrive, I must leave this place immediately. The immortal was utterly depraved and cruel. My legs were weak, and my body felt like a block of ice about to melt. If any male appeared before me now, I feared I would lose control of myself. I pierced my left leg again, using the excruciating pain to stimulate my body's latent energy, and stumbled toward the sound of breathing. I had thought it would be difficult to find, but it was only a wall away. Under the cold, white moonlight, a man dressed in elegant, luxurious robes leaned against the wall. His handsome face was flushed with a faint blush, and his fair neck was tilted upward in obvious discomfort. I saw him as my savior. If I must lose something tonight, at least I will choose it myself. This is my only chance to change my fate. Like a starving tiger pouncing on its prey, I threw myself into the man's arms. The last shred of clarity allowed me to recognize the imperial dragon emblem on his collar. I felt completely at ease. In the chaos, I fumbled my way to the door of a dilapidated shed in the alley, hoping to avoid the beggars. Everything that followed happened naturally. The man's long, slender fingers gripped my body tightly, and I surrendered myself to the drug, melting into a pool of desire. We were like dry kindling in flames, embracing each other and burning within one another's bodies. When I woke up again, a piece of muscle covered in bite marks and scratch marks filled my vision. I couldn't help but touch it, relishing the sensation. To my surprise, the muscle suddenly let out a terrified cry. "How dare you!" I snapped back to reality and looked up to see the crown prince with a shocked and angry expression, as if he had been wronged. I reacted quickly and accused him first. "Who are you? What did you do to me?" The crown prince furrowed his brows. "Don't you recognize me? You're so cunning. We clearly met at the palace banquet." Of course. I recognized the crown prince. In my previous life. It wasn't until long after my marriage that I found out that during the palace banquet before the selection of concubines, Pei Yuan had looked at me twice. It must have been those two glances that caught Princess Huayan's attention. My mother had told me that xianren was a bedtime potion from the western regions, used by the emperor to train his concubines. Such a potion could only be obtained by a princess. The wine the princess bestowed upon me must be tainted. you.Then is merely a guard in my household, without the princess's behind-the-scenes instructions. Who dares to offend a noblewoman in the imperial city? My greatest enemy may come from the palace itself. Therefore, in this life, I must align myself with the Eastern Palace to survive. Last night, I successfully took the first step. Now, I must dispel the crown prince's suspicions. At the palace banquet, I sat among the other noblewomen in the lower seats, keeping my eyes lowered out of respect for the imperial family's authority. Therefore, even if I now deny recognizing the crown prince, it would be reasonable and make him believe I am pure and innocent. "Who are you? How dare you impersonate the crown prince?" I curled up, wiped away tears, and cried. "You bullied me, but now you dare to use the prince's name. I love the prince so much, and you've taken away every chance I had." I cried so pitifully that I nearly shook the roof of the dilapidated shed. Several tall guards burst into the shed, dressed like palace attendants. "Your Highness, we've finally found you." Pei Yuan was so overwhelmed by my tears that he didn't know what to do. "Stop crying. I really am the crown prince. They can all testify." I screamed wildly. "You're not. The crown prince is wise and heroic. How could he act like a dog, biting people? The crown prince is handsome and noble. How could he be like you, with such a lecherous expression? The crown prince is my hero. How could he be like you, a scoundrel?" The guards witnessed the originally angry crown prince being struck speechless by the repeated cries of wise and heroic, handsome and noble, and hero. "This is the Eastern Palace token." A golden plaque was held up in front of my tear-filled eyes. Pei Yuan couldn't suppress a smile. "Do you believe it now?" The Eastern Palace guards chimed in. "This is the wise and mighty, handsome and heroic hero you spoke of, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince." I stopped crying and reached out to touch the plaque. But Pei Yuan pulled his hand away, leaving me grasping at air. Then he suddenly grabbed my pulse. After a moment, his brows furrowed. "You've been drugged too?" The Crown Prince was renowned for his bravery in battle and his mastery of medicine. He had once saved an injured soldier on the battlefield and was praised by the people for his kindness. All I had to do was let him feel my pulse and act terrified. "Is the Crown Prince going to kill me?" Pei Yuan released my wrist. With his medical skills, he must have been able to determine what kind of poison I had been given. And that poison was most likely from the palace. He must have guessed that I was just another pawn being manipulated by the palace nobles. At that moment, I took a step back. "Your Highness, please rest assured. Though I admire you, I dare not harbor any improper thoughts toward the Eastern Palace." I gathered my robe and stood up stubbornly. "What happened last night? I will not tell anyone. Your Highness need not trouble yourself." With that, I stumbled out the door. The Crown Prince actually did not stop me, that dog of a man. I deliberately pulled down my sleeve, letting a jade pendant fall in front of him. The pendant was engraved with the Shin family crest. Engraved on it were my maiden name in small characters. I walked out without looking back. I couldn't let the Crown Prince see even a hint of lingering affection for him, otherwise I would become nothing more than a cliché prey in his eyes. I stumbled out of the alley, my skirt stained with blood, and the wound on my leg throbbing painfully. At the end of the alley stood Duan Ming. When he found me, he was clearly overjoyed and rushed toward me. Exhausted from blood loss and last night's fatigue, I couldn't resist and fainted in his arms. When I came to, I was lying on the bed in my bedroom. My father's face was ashen, and my mother was crying until her eyes were red. Duan Ming was slapping himself, saying, "Last night, I saw that the young lady had been poisoned by love. If we couldn't balance the yin and yang, the young lady would have died. That's why I lost my composure. I truly love the young lady and want to protect her. If the young lady doesn't mind, I'm willing to marry her as my legitimate wife." He thought I had lost all my memories due to the medicine, so he lied with a straight face. I weakly asked, "What are you talking about?" Duan Ming gripped my hand tightly and said firmly, "Has the young lady forgotten? Last night, you were poisoned by love. When you saw me, you threw yourself into my arms. I had no choice but to help you harmonize your yin and yang." He stared at me with a sticky gaze, as if reminding me, or perhaps warning me, "Miss, isn't there a red mole on your right shoulder? Last night, during our intimate moments, I saw it clearly. I will never forget your beauty." Duan Ming knelt before my bed, slapping himself hard across the face while tears streamed down his cheeks, pouring out his helplessness, disrespect, regret, and admiration from last night. His self-blame made it difficult for my parents to deal with him. The court physician in the room also corroborated his words. "Miss, you were indeed poisoned by a mysterious love potion last night. If it is not resolved in time, you will die from your blood flowing backward. It was the same in my previous life." The court physician had testified, but I had no memory of that night. My parents gritted their teeth in frustration, "So Duan Ming truly saved your life. Merchants hold a lowly status, and even though the Shin family is the wealthiest imperial merchant, they remain inferior in the world of fame and fortune. I am of the same age as the Crown Prince, and my parents have nurtured me carefully, hoping that one day I could be selected for the Eastern Palace and have a bright future. Everything was ruined last night. Ruined by a mere gatekeeper. My father's hair turned white overnight, and the next day he went to the Eastern Palace to beg for forgiveness. I was already on the list of candidates for the princess. And if this matter was not handled properly, it could be seen as a challenge to the Eastern Palace and a disrespect to imperial authority. The Eastern Palace did not punish him harshly, and the Crown Prince even came personally to tell me not to take my own life and to live on. Duan Ming knelt in our courtyard for several days, seemingly apologizing. But in reality, he was forcing me to marry him. A woman who loses her chastity loses control over her own life. In the end, burdened by Duan Ming's life-saving favor, I accepted my fate and married into the Duan family. Though it seemed like a marriage, it was actually Duan Ming becoming a son-in-law, bringing his old mother to live in the Shen family mansion. A servant rose overnight to become a son-in-law, enjoying the wealth and prestige accumulated by the Shen family over 3 generations of imperial merchants. As the only daughter of the Shen family, I had lost my future in the imperial palace. My parents could only accept their fate and exhaust the Shen family's connections to support Duan Ming's career. With mountains of gold and silver paving the way. 3 years later, Duan Ming finally achieved the title of 4th-rank Mingwei general through his exploits in suppressing bandits. He was not born with the talent of a scholar or a hero. This was the limit of what the Shen family could achieve for him. Parents love their children and plan for their future. My parents only hoped he would treat me well. But on the day Duan Ming achieved fame and fortune, he brought those 3 beggars. The 3 beggars shouted at me upon seeing me, "We are the lovers the general's wife cheated on him with before her marriage." They opened their foul-smelling mouths, bared their blackened teeth, and mocked me shamelessly in public. I thought they were just troublemakers and told Duan Ming to drive them away. But Duan Ming suddenly changed his expression and laughed maliciously. "Why drive them away? They're telling the truth. These 3 beggars aren't just your mistress's lovers, they're also the matchmakers who brought us together." "What did you say?" That potion was indeed from the western regions. "After 3 years, your mistress is still oblivious." Duan Ming said this boldly in front of my parents. "It wasn't me who humiliated your wife that night, it was these 3 beggars." He added with a smirk, "Your wife was so alluring back then. If she hadn't been touched by those beggars, I would have found her disgusting. But that night, I could have managed to touch her. After all, who would have known in that alley? Father-in-law, mother-in-law, you actually treated me as your savior." Duan Ming shook the general's armor on his body, looking majestic. "In truth, I merely picked up the young lady's body that morning. Yet she, such a noble lady, married me, and I gained this wealth and prestige. When my father learned the truth, he was so enraged that he spat blood and died instantly. My mother tried to kill herself with Duan Ming, but he pushed her into the corner of the table, causing her head to bleed profusely. I felt a chill run through my body and pulled out my hairpin to kill myself with Duan Ming, but he kicked me off the platform, sending me crashing to the ground, covered in blood. As I lay dying, I saw the 3 beggars closing in on me. The memories of that night flashed before my eyes like a kaleidoscope. Under the cover of night, they bit and tore at my flesh, their bodies damp with mist. I screamed in agony, nearly losing my mind, while Duan Ming embraced the young woman he had been keeping outside, watching coldly. That day, Duan Ming told everyone that he had returned from a raid against bandits and found his wife having an affair with beggars. The scandal was exposed, and his wife went mad and killed her own parents. Duan Ming had accidentally killed me in the process. At that time, the imperial court was in decline, with internal and external troubles, and the government offices were in disarray. Such a ridiculous lie was never thoroughly investigated. Thus, Duan Ming not only obtained an official position but also rightfully claimed the family fortune accumulated by the Shen family over 3 generations. He embraced his young mistress, brought his old mother, and stepped over my corpse to replace the Shen family's signboard with Duan Mansion, becoming the new master of the Shen family. Everything from my previous life was vividly etched in my memory and played out again after my rebirth. At present, my mother, having heard the court physician's words, followed the same path as in my previous life, tearfully urging me, "Qingji, things have come to this. You cannot blame Duan Ming. Accept your fate." The news has already spread throughout the streets. My father's expression grew solemn. "Marry Duan Ming and claim that you were already betrothed." At least it will be legitimate. I will go to the Eastern Palace to apologize. The Crown Prince is merciful, he will not hold it against you. If we don't do this, it will be because you had an affair with. My father gritted his teeth, with a guard. This violates the laws of propriety, defies the Eastern Palace, and shows contempt for the heir to the throne. It is a capital offense punishable by the execution of 9 generations of your family. My parents didn't know that the one who had adultery with me last night was none other than the Crown Prince of the Eastern Palace. you.Then believed he had everything under control. His eyes gleamed with greed as he grabbed my hand. Miss, for the sake of our clan, you must endure this humiliation and marry me. My parents' words were all reasonable. you.Then, or rather the mastermind behind the scheme, was certain that the Shin family would swallow their pride for the greater good. you.Then was confident. Yet he still pretended. Miss, I truly did not mean to harm you. If you are angry, please strike me with a knife, and I will not resist. I stared at you.Den's hypocritical face and suddenly smiled gently. You.Then the guard. The doctor said you saved my life. How could I bear to kill my savior? I raised my hand, touched you.Den's face, and called out to him in a soft voice. But you.Then, you hurt me last night. I want to punish you with a few strokes. Do you accept? My beauty was unmatched in the capital, and you.Then was utterly captivated by my soft words. He nodded vigorously. I'm willing to accept the punishment, as long as the young lady is pleased. He thought this was just a little temper tantrum from a young woman. He had already gained so much, so enduring a little harmless suffering to please the beauty was more than he was willing to give. My parents did not interfere. you.Then was led into the courtyard, lying on his back with his limbs bound by other guards. He was puzzled. Aren't you going to beat me with a board? Why am I lying like this? I supported my aching waist and legs, walked over to him, and tapped his cheek with the flat side of the dagger. Still speaking softly, because I'm going to teach you.Then a lesson myself. you.Then thought I was flirting with him and smiled foolishly. Soon, he couldn't smile anymore. My knife slid from his face, down to his Adam's apple, his chest, and his abdomen. Finally, it landed on the small bulge between his legs. you.Then panicked. Miss, what are you doing? Didn't you just say you'd willingly accept a knife from me? I twisted my lips into a cold smile and suddenly swung my knife between his legs. Blood spattered everywhere. A sharp, agonizing scream echoed through the Shin mansion. Moments later, a man and a pile of unrecognizable flesh were thrown out of the Shin mansion's front door. The man's groin was covered in blood, writhing in pain on the ground. A passerby noticed, "Hey, a fresh eunuch." I walked out to the crowd and said to the onlookers, "This guard dog dared to bite the master's family. This is your fate." you.Then, in agony, glared at me with hatred. You filthy whore." I twisted the knife that had castrated him, then tossed it aside in disgust. "You're the filthy one." I castrated you.Then with a single stroke. Of course, I could have killed him with that blow. But if he were dead, how would I lure out the mastermind behind this? Among the onlookers, someone looked suspicious and hurried away, likely to report what had happened. Sure enough, within an hour, a maid came to report. you.Then was dragged away, leaving only a pool of blood on the ground. In the days that followed, the capital was abuzz with rumors. Some said that the Shin family's eldest daughter had been drugged and defiled by the gatekeeper, leading him to castrate him in public out of shame. Others claimed that the Shin family's eldest daughter had an affair with the gatekeeper and then betrayed him. Amidst the rumors, the consensus was that no matter what, the Shin family's eldest daughter had lost her virtue and should be hanged with a white silk sash to save face. Others praised the guard, saying, "That guard surnamed you.Then is truly a role model for us." A mere gatekeeper got to taste the daughter of the wealthiest merchant in the imperial capital. Even if he was castrated, he still came out ahead. My parents had strictly forbidden the servants from spreading rumors in my presence. But these rumors still found their way to my ears. The eldest elder of the Shin family even sent someone to present me with a piece of white silk, the meaning of which need not be explained. Looking at that 3-foot-long white silk, I had indeed considered taking my own life in my previous life. But my parents have only me as their child. They love and protect me, and have planned for my future. I cannot bear to leave them to live out their days in poverty and loneliness. So I reluctantly agreed to marry him. In the end, I ended up bringing ruin upon my entire family. In this life, I carefully placed that piece of white silk into a box. The one who should be hanged is someone else. Everyone thought I couldn't survive. But I cooperated with the doctor and nurtured my body, compared to the broken body of my previous life. This time, the only serious injury was the wound on my leg that I had deliberately inflicted on myself. The doctor examined my pulse and gently reminded me not to indulge in carnal desires. The potency of the immortal's lust potion lies in its toxicity. A single episode could cause the user to expend 10 times their vital essence, leaving them weakened for months. However, the medicine the doctor prescribed restored my vital energy within 3 days. One day, out of curiosity, I peeked through the corner of the curtain and recognized that the person tending to my health was not an ordinary doctor, but Li Changyu, the renowned female physician of the Imperial Women's Clinic. Li Changyu was the foremost female physician, attending only to the imperial family, in both this life and the last. Only Crown Prince Pei Yuan had ever been granted her services. Did the Crown Prince send you? Li Changyu did not deny it. His Highness asked you to take care of your health. Since we were acquaintances, I simply pulled aside the curtain. Dr. Li saw that I looked refreshed and smiled with relief. The Crown Prince sent me because he feared you might attempt suicide. Now, seeing your rosy complexion, I know you will overcome this ordeal. I replied calmly, chastity is nothing but a shackle imposed by society. What I must do is break free from this shackle, not add another layer of white silk over it. Dr. Li said, you have a very open mind. How tragic for that Lin family maiden. She was abducted by bandits for a night, and upon returning home, she hanged herself. When I arrived, everyone was cursing her. I furrowed my brows. What were they cursing? They were cursing the Lin family maiden for dying too late. She should have hanged herself immediately after being dishonored to prove her loyalty, rather than returning to the Lin mansion to die. A 17-year-old girl, unfortunate in life, and now even her own family is cursing her, saying, you died at home, bringing shame to the Lin family's reputation. Li Changyu sighed deeply, her eyes filled with pity and regret, as well as self-blame for not being able to save her in time. In my previous life, it was Li Changyu who healed my broken body. She had even hinted to me that such injuries were not the work of a single person. At the time, I was blinded by you.Then and didn't dare to think deeply about it. Li Changyu probably feared I would follow Lin's example and take my own life, so he didn't dare to reveal the full truth. After changing the bandages, I grabbed Li Changyu and asked, did the Crown Prince say anything else? He only instructed you to rest and recover, there was nothing else. I curled my lips, what a cowardly man. The timing of my rebirth was too delicate. As if heaven was playing with me once more. That night, framing the Crown Prince was my only option. The situation was too passive, and half of my bet was on the Crown Prince. Li Changyu asked me, is there anything you want me to tell the Crown Prince? Since that's the case, I have nothing more to say. The tactic of feigning disinterest, I wasn't unfamiliar with. Li Changyu smiled. I'll pass that on to the Crown Prince. After the court physician left, my mother came in to see me again. She couldn't help but ask, tell your mother. Who was it that night? Mother, Someone did indeed defile me. But it was definitely not Duan-ming. Then who was it? Who drugged you? Who defiled you? You won't tell us the details. Things have come to this. You must tell your father and mother so we can find a way to save you. Before my mother could finish speaking, a maid rushed in, panting. Lady! Miss! It's terrible. Princess Huayin has arrived at the mansion, and Duan-ming has returned with her. I gripped my mother's wrist tightly. Mother, you will soon know the truth. That man will definitely come to claim me today. This matter reaching the palace did not surprise me at all. Losing one's virginity before the imperial selection was seen as a challenge to the royal family and a disrespect to the crown prince. Therefore, Princess Huayin using this as an excuse to come to the Shin family to seek justice was entirely reasonable. The princess sat elegantly on the imperial carriage, while the Shin family members knelt to greet her. Rise. As the words fell, I dared to stand up and raise my gaze toward the princess. This was the second time I had seen Princess Huayin. 10 days ago at the palace banquet, the princess had bestowed me with a cup of fine wine. When I thanked her, I had caught a brief glimpse of her. Now, I studied the princess carefully. She was 30 years old. In the Great Qi dynasty, some princesses marry ministers, while others are married off to foreign countries for political alliances. Most of them are married off before the age of 20. However, Princess Huayin had not yet married at this age, and Emperor you.Then was not in a hurry. The memorials urging the emperor to marry her off were repeatedly ignored by the emperor. The princess was stunningly beautiful, dressed in silk robes, adorned with gold and jade, leaning against the imperial carriage, resembling a wilted, world-weary peony. Duan-ming, who had recently been castrated, hunched over and spoke in a shrill voice. Princess. Before Shinqingji was selected as a concubine, she met me in a narrow alley and had an affair with me. After the affair was exposed, she poisoned me. She wants to climb her way into the Eastern Palace, deceive the crown prince, and deceive the emperor. Quickly execute her entire clan. Avenge me. A man who had lost that part of himself would inevitably have a twisted mindset. He had no time to pretend to be in love, he just wanted to kill me immediately. The princess raised her eyes. Shinqingji, do you know your crime? I retorted, I was framed and drugged. I am also a victim. May I ask the princess? What crime have I committed? The princess showed no remorse. In her eyes, I was no better than an ant. Even if she forced me to death, she would only find it amusing. I don't care about the twists and turns of the story. Before the selection of the princess, you had an affair with a man, that's a fact set in stone. This alone is enough for me to sentence you to death. She raised her hand, and 2 palace maids stepped forward, one holding a piece of bright red wedding silk, the other holding a piece of pale white silk. You have 2 choices, either submit to your fate and marry Duan-ming, and I will personally preside over your wedding, or hang yourself by the neck and die a chaste and honorable death. My parents knelt on the ground begging for mercy. Princess, have mercy. Duan-ming is now a eunuch, how can he marry? What's wrong with being a eunuch? The princess laughed innocently yet cruelly. Eunuchs can still have concubines. It's just that they miss the pleasures of the bedchamber. Miss Shin will have to endure it. With the princess backing him, Duan-ming grew arrogant. I became a eunuch because of you. Shinqingji, you cut off my line of descendants. From now on, you will serve me for the rest of your life. I refuse to marry. I rebelled forcefully. Duan-ming's indenture is still in my Shin family's possession. According to the laws of the Great Qi dynasty, if a servant commits a wrongdoing, the master may punish them at their discretion. Those who commit serious offenses need not go through the county office, they may be beaten to death within the inner courtyard. If Duan-ming dares to step foot into my Shin family's door, even with your princess's mansion as a guarantee. I will make sure he has no place to be buried. Shin Qingxi, dare you defy this princess's orders? This servant dares not. This servant merely reminds the princess that the laws of the great Qi dynasty were established by our ancestors. The princess should not defy the will of our forebears, otherwise she may invite gossip. Hua Yin straightened her upper body, and her beautiful face finally showed a hint of anger. Suddenly, she smiled. What a sharp tongue you have. Since you refuse to marry, then choose the second option. The white silk was held up to my eyes. You yourself admitted that you lost your virginity that night. According to the laws of the great Qi dynasty, a maiden who loses her virginity before the selection of a concubine is considered an insult to the imperial family. The emperor himself has said that a woman who loses her chastity must commit suicide with white silk to demonstrate her virtue. This was originally a private punishment. However, Emperor you.Then, who was on the throne at the time, had turned this private punishment into an ironclad law in the eyes of those in power. A woman who loses her chastity is no better than a murderer or an arsonist. I used the law to argue with the princess, but she countered with the law. Moreover, you met with an adulterer in secret, your crime is even more severe. For multiple offenses, I, the princess, grant you a piece of white silk to preserve your body. Duan Ming, escort the young lady home. Duan Ming finally seized the opportunity to take revenge. He grabbed the ends of the white silk and stepped closer to me. My parents knelt on the ground, begging the princess to spare my life, but they were held down by the guards. I tried to dodge, but my hands were twisted behind my back by two burly maids, one of whom grabbed my hair, forcing me to look up at the white silk. How noble you are, Miss Bai. You've fallen into my hands after all. Duan Ming gripped the white silk, his eyes filled with malice. I won't rest until I break your neck. At the last moment, I shouted, you can't kill me. I'm pregnant. Princess Huayin seemed to be struck to the core by those words, bursting into laughter. Yet her eyes gleamed with even greater malice. So what if you're pregnant? Do you think this princess would pity you and spare your life? Having a bastard makes you even more deserving of death. The child in my womb is not a bastard, it is a descendant of the imperial family. What did you say, princess? Don't you want to know who touched me that night? Under the princess's gaze, I shouted loudly. The one who spent the night with me that night was the crown prince, the current heir to the throne. Pei Yuan. Everyone froze in shock, and my parents' mouths dropped open. Duan Ming grew desperate. This woman is mad. How dare she slander the crown prince? It was me that night. It was me. I looked at the princess's stunned face and confronted her. What a coincidence. The crown prince was also drugged and ended up in an alley that night. The princess should know best, right? The princess's face turned pale. She was the one who drugged him. So of course she knew best. I scolded the two maids. I have a royal descendant in my womb. Who dares to touch me? The two old maids were so frightened they loosened their grip, and I immediately took the opportunity to break free from their restraints. I looked confident, but inside I was trembling with fear. I wasn't pregnant. Of course. This was just a desperate delaying tactic. This lie was so fragile, even a moment's thought would reveal its fatal flaw. What I didn't expect was that it wasn't the seasoned old women who saw through the lie, but the unmarried Princess Huayin. Shin Qingxi. This happened only 10 days ago. How could you be pregnant so quickly? Someone. Check her pulse to see if it's true. The imperial physician accompanying the princess stepped forward and leaned close to me. Miss Shin, please show me your hand. I clenched my palm tightly under my sleeve. The physician urged. Whether you are pregnant or not, I can tell by feeling your pulse. Miss Shin, please extend your hand. Why won't you extend your hand? You're guilty. Duan Ming pressed forward. I told you. Qingji is obsessed with becoming the crown prince's consort. She even dares to imagine she's carrying the crown prince's child. Ridiculous. This madwoman. Strangle her. The imperial physician urged again. Miss Shin. Please extend your hand. As soon as the imperial physician touched my pulse, this lie would be exposed. All my cards had been played. I looked toward the door but still didn't see that figure. Please roll up your sleeve yourself. With no other choice, I lowered my head and rolled up the sleeve of my right arm, exposing the veins beneath my skin to the cool breeze. Suddenly, a pair of warm hands gripped my wrist. My entire body trembled, thinking the lie was about to be exposed. But I heard a gentle voice laughing. You're really pregnant. I looked up sharply, thinking I had encountered an incompetent doctor. But the face I met was Pei Yuan's handsome and elegant one. His large hand was tightly wrapped around my wrist. The court physician had long been left behind by the crown prince. The Shin mansion, which had been surrounded by the princess's men, was now filled with palace guards from the eastern palace. Pei Yuan felt my pulse, smiling boldly. You're quite skilled. Shin Jiji. Jiji was my childhood nickname. Cold sweat poured down my body. I let out a sudden breath of relief and gritted my teeth in anger. You came just in time. You dog of a crown prince. Pei Yuan could obviously tell I wasn't pregnant. His hand moved from my pulse to my wrist, then to the palm of my hand. His long fingers forcefully slipped between my fingers, intertwining with mine. Then he raised my hand high before Princess Huayin. It was I who met Qingji after drinking that night, and Qingji is indeed carrying my child. Pei Yuan spoke boldly and unconstrainedly. If my elder sister has any objections, submit a formal petition sealed with the princess's seal to the Eastern Palace, and I will review it when I have time. Pei Yuan was the legitimate heir to the throne, born of the empress. Not only was his lineage pure and noble, but at the age of 15, he led troops to subdue the northern barbarian tribes, recovering 13 cities for the Great Qi Empire. At 17, he took charge of the imperial council, purging corruption throughout the court and the country. Now, after 3 years as regent, he held absolute power. Everyone said that Pei Yuan was the future of the Great Qi Empire, the savior of the people. However, Princess Huayin's biological mother was merely a dancer whom the emperor had favored during a tour. Huayin was only recognized as his daughter and brought back to the palace at the age of 5. She had no maternal clan to rely on, even though the emperor clearly favored this daughter, given the vast disparity in their status. If Princess Huayin had something to say, she indeed had to first submit a memorial to the Eastern Palace and then wait for the crown prince's mood. She could resort to underhanded tactics in private, but in a direct confrontation, the princess would inevitably be at a disadvantage. Princess Huayin's expression was priceless. Your Royal Highness. Such reckless behavior is utterly unacceptable according to the principles of propriety. The crown prince spoke decisively. Qingji was one of the candidates for crown princess. My nighttime meeting with her was entirely proper and above board. If my elder sister wishes to report this to the emperor, then I shall have someone thoroughly investigate the wine served at the palace banquet. How could it have caused both me and Miss Shin to lose our composure? These words were a veiled threat, implying that the princess had resorted to underhanded tactics behind the scenes. In recent days, the crown prince must have uncovered quite a lot. The princess, feeling guilty, immediately backed down. Duan Ming, however, was unwilling to accept this and went to the crown prince to make a complaint. Your Royal Highness, do not let Qingji deceive you. That night, even if it wasn't me who touched her, it must have been 3 beggars. Before Duan Ming could finish his sentence, a long sword suddenly pierced his throat. The sword was wielded with such ferocity and precision that it sent a chilling sword chi rippling through the air. Duan Ming stared wide-eyed, his pupils shrinking in terror as he saw his own neck nearly severed by the sword. Blood spattered everywhere. and the crowd screamed in horror. Even the princess was so frightened she fell off her palanquin. The crown prince drew his sword, stepped on Duanming's body, wiped the blood from his sword with a cold expression, and glared at the princess. The matter of selecting a consort is none of your concern, princess. If you dare to interfere again, you will face the ruthless blade. The princess had entered the Shin mansion in such splendor, but now she left in utter disgrace. The attendants carrying the palanquin were still shaken, nearly tripping over the threshold. The princess fled in near panic. Duanming's body lay at my feet, and my legs felt like they were made of lead, unable to move. Pei Yuan kicked the corpse aside with a single kick, then calmly reassured my parents. Don't be afraid, he's already dead. My parents. We're not afraid of the dead, we're afraid of you. Your Highness the Crown Prince. Pei Yuan turned to me. Stop pretending. I just heard you curse me. What did you call me? A dog prince? Your Highness must have heard wrong. Ha ha. I tried to bluff my way out, but he grabbed my collar and pulled me back. You're pregnant. Why are you running around? I was just making it up. Ah. You made up that you're pregnant with the Crown Prince's child? That's treason. Punishable by execution of your entire clan. I grew furious. You came too late, I had no other choice. I did this on purpose. The Crown Prince suddenly pulled out the jade pendant engraved with my name. You're playing games with me, thinking I can't see through your tricks. I felt a pang of guilt. That night in the alley, I could have controlled myself, but you pounced like a starving tiger, making me lose my composure and control. Afterward, you dared to accuse me first, saying you dared not associate with the Eastern Palace. Yet you threw this jade pendant, afraid I wouldn't find you. How clumsy and calculated. Shinjiji, have you never seduced a man before? All my tricks were seen through by him. No wonder he hadn't spoken to me in the past few days. He was testing how far I could go on my own. Will the prince kill me? Killing you would be too boring. In 3 days, the concubine selection will take place. You must attend. I was momentarily speechless. I had baited the hook, but the fish had seen through my intentions, yet it still bit the bait and was hooked. Why? I had schemed so meticulously, yet he didn't hold a single grudge. That night, if it hadn't been you, it would have been the princess's men who pounced. Better you, Shinjiji, than anyone else. Besides, the crown prince chuckled softly, leaned close to my ear, and whispered, Miss Shin, do you remember that night when you clung tightly to my arm, repeatedly calling me your savior? As he drew near, I first caught the scent of cold sandalwood. My ears grew hot, and my cheeks flushed slightly. I composed myself and spoke honestly. If it weren't for your highness that night, I would be dead by now. I said sincerely, your highness truly is my savior. Miss Shin, I often have the same dream. Pei Yuan said. In the dream, you are my savior. He handed me an Eastern Palace token and turned away casually. Remember to come for the selection of concubines. It's just a formality to give you your proper title. I looked down at the pure gold token. Besides the Eastern Palace cloud patterns, it bore the characters Zhao Lin. Those were Pei Yuan's characters. The world called him the Zhaolin Crown Prince, symbolizing the sunlight descending upon the Great Qi dynasty. He was the savior and enlightened ruler whom everyone in the Great Qi dynasty had pinned their hopes on. Yet such a man had been driven to suicide by Princess Hua-Yin in his previous life. I still remember that cold, rainy night in my previous life. Duanming had gone out to suppress bandits, and I went to the temple to pray for his safety. When I left in the morning, everything was calm, but when I returned to the city, a palace coup had already begun. That palace coup was instigated by Princess Hua-Yin. By the time I returned to the city, the palace coup was nearing its end. The defeated rebels had taken me hostage, and Prince Xiaolin ordered the imperial guards to stop pursuing them. Hua Yin laughed. For the sake of an insignificant concubine? You can still be so merciful. No wonder everyone says that once you ascend the throne, the great Qi dynasty will usher in a century of prosperity. Alas, Prince Xiaolin, you won't live much longer. Under the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of Prince Xiaolin, separated by the gauze curtain. It had been 3 years since we last saw each other. 3 years had passed, and the once proud crown prince now looked haggard, with white hair sprouting from his temples. 3 years ago, the crown prince had also been poisoned in an alley. After selecting a consort, he chose a candidate within a single day, Lin Shi, the adopted daughter of the Duke of the State. Rumors on the streets claimed that the crown prince had been poisoned in the alley that night, and Lin Shi had saved him by neutralizing the poison. Out of gratitude and consideration for Lin's reputation, the position of crown princess naturally fell to her. After the marriage, Lin gave birth to a son and a daughter for the crown prince, but both children died painfully at the age of 1. The imperial physician said it was due to congenital deficiencies. It is said that the crown prince loved those 2 children deeply, and the loss of the children at the age of 1 was far more painful than the loss of those who died in the womb. The crown prince's health declined after that. The imperial physicians could not determine the cause, attributing it to excessive grief. His health deteriorated further. Yet a year ago, he managed to travel to the northern border despite his illness to repel the invading northern Dan forces. Upon his triumphant return, the crown prince had grown many white hairs. As the crown prince was at the end of his strength, Princess Huayin swiftly expanded her influence within the court and finally launched a palace coup on this rainy night when the emperor was gravely ill. She failed. In the darkness of the night, Crown Prince Xiaolin shot an arrow through the forehead of the rebel who was holding me hostage. He saved me, and I hadn't even had time to express my gratitude. Princess Lin, the crown prince's consort, rushed over and knelt down, begging the crown prince to spare the princess. The princess seemed to surrender, but in the rain, she spoke a single sentence to the crown prince. That night was too chaotic, though I heard the words clearly. I cannot recall them now. It was likely a taunt, a threat. The crown prince's face suddenly turned deathly pale. He violently coughed up a mouthful of black blood and staggered. The princess and Lady Lin were both taken away. I stepped forward to support the crown prince, but he only looked at me with a sorrowful expression and murmured, "That spring banquet. We met." My heart trembled, and I tried to get closer, but he pushed me away with his hand, handed me an umbrella, and told me to return to the mansion and not look back. The rain suddenly grew heavier, and a sword chi sliced through my hair. I spun around abruptly, my pupils contracting. Prince Xiaolin had drawn his sword and slashed his own throat. Blood and rain fell together onto the land of Daki. That night, the people of Daki lost their hope. Later, Princess Lin, the crown prince's consort, also poisoned herself to death, while Princess Huayin laughed hysterically as she plunged from the city walls. Emperor you.Then died of a heart attack, and the throne was inherited by the mediocre Prince Qing. Even as a ruler, Prince Qing struggled to maintain the status quo. The great Qi dynasty began its decline. Half a year later, tragedy struck my family, yet no officials came to investigate. Shortly after my death, the great Qi dynasty, bereft of Prince Xiaolin, was conquered by the Northern Di and Northern Dan tribes. Thus, a dynasty began its decline and eventual collapse. At this moment, I caressed the Eastern Palace token engraved with the characters Xiaolin, gazing at the vibrant, upright figure of Pei Xiaolin in the sunlight. In my previous life, I knew that the crown prince was a good man, so after being reborn, I treacherously framed him and exploited him. I believed he was unaware of my schemes and even took pride in them. Now it seems he was merely merciful. He guessed my schemes against him, yet still came to my rescue at the critical moment. He guessed I had no way out, so he paved a path for me. He guessed the world was harsh on women, so he spared my dignity, ensuring I could leave with honor. In this life, my fate may have been altered. But what of Pei Zhaolin? What did Princess Huayin say to him that drove such a man to despair and take his own life? Why did he fall so ill? Why did he grow white hair? Why did he draw his sword and end his life? In this life, my fate is bound to the crown prince. I must not let him repeat the same mistakes. I caught up to the crown prince, Your Highness. If you trust me, send someone to investigate the dealings between Princess Huayin and the Duke's mansion over the past few years. My Shen family's connections don't reach the princess's mansion or the Duke's mansion, but the Eastern Palace can. I only need to point him in the right direction. The crown prince seemed to want to ask me why, but I told him directly. The crown princess is the future empress, and the empress's offspring will be the future emperor. The princess interfered in the crown prince's selection of a bride for the sake of that imperial throne, and the duke's mansion is the only power behind her. It was the Guogong mansion that helped Princess Huayin return to the palace. In my previous life, the princess had allied with the Guogong mansion to instigate that palace coup. The crown prince finally understood. Are you certain I would come today? I replied boldly. Your Highness is a wise man, you will inevitably discover that the incident in the alley that night was the princess's doing. I believe Your Highness will surely come to my rescue. I made it clear with determination, because we have a common enemy and shared interests. Pei Yuan pinched my earlobe and scolded me with a light laugh. Little fox. Duan Ming was killed. And the crown prince did it himself. Public opinion on the streets shifted abruptly, and rumors began to spread about my marriage to the crown prince. Duan Ming became a traitorous villain despised by all. My reputation was restored, and the entire Great Qi realm tacitly acknowledged me as the crown prince's intended bride, with only the formalities remaining. On the day of the selection, my mother dressed me meticulously. She banished all traces of sorrow from her face, smiling broadly and praising my good fortune for turning misfortune into blessing. The crown prince is a man worthy of trust. Your mother is so happy for you. Your father hasn't stopped smiling for days. I looked at myself in the mirror, but a sense of unease crept into my heart. This unease was confirmed on my way to the Eastern Palace. The crowd on the street was rushing toward the city gate, saying that the Lin family's eldest daughter was going to jump off the city wall. I got off the palanquin and rushed over. I saw the former crown princess, now the Lin family's eldest daughter, Lin Nanshu, dressed in her wedding gown, standing on the city wall, shouting. It was me that night. I was the one who saved the prince from the poison. The Shen family's daughter was an imposter. In my previous life, it was this Lin family's eldest daughter who had married into the Eastern Palace under the pretext of the alley incident. On that rainy night, when the princess's rebellion failed, Lin Nansno knelt down to plead for mercy for the princess, clearly revealing that they were part of the same faction. Everything was now clear. On that day at the palace banquet, because the crown prince had favored me with a glance, the princess decided to eliminate me completely. She poisoned me with toxic wine, had beggars defile me, and then had guards impersonate me to ruin my reputation, forcing me into marriage. More importantly, it severed the crown prince's feelings for me, clearing the way for Lin Nanshu to become the crown princess. The princess's plan was flawless. But this time, I've disrupted it. The current situation is a desperate act of desperation. Lin Nansno, dressed in her wedding gown, stood on the most prominent city wall, portraying herself as a victim. Shen Qingji is an imposter. The crown princess should be me, having lost my virtue. I can only die to prove my innocence. Princess Huayin won't spare me, nor will she spare Pei Yuan. The Lin family's apparent attack on me is actually a hidden arrow aimed at the Eastern Palace. As soon as I appeared, I became the center of attention. Lin Nanshu stood on the city gate, looking down at me. She seemed ready to take her own life. But her hands beneath her sleeves were tightly gripping the corner of the city wall. Death was a ruse. The real goal was to create a commotion and force the Eastern Palace to submit. If you claim I'm an imposter, Miss Lin, let me ask you, did you see the arrow wound on the prince's right chest that night? Lin Nanshu replied. Of course I saw it clearly. The wound was quite deep. It was heartbreaking. The palace guards who had rushed over shouted in protest. The prince has no arrow wound on his right chest, it's on his left chest. Lin Nanshu didn't hesitate to change her story. Right. There's a wound on his chest. It was too dark. And I remembered incorrectly. I scoffed. How could he survive an arrow wound to the chest? Do you think the crown prince is made of iron? Miss Lin, you are the daughter of a duke's mansion. Why would you disregard your reputation and lie so blatantly? The crowd below burst into laughter. Lin Nanshu was so embarrassed that her face turned red. She scolded me. Shin Qingxi, you are indeed a merchant's daughter. Crude and vulgar. How dare you joke about the crown prince's private matters? Miss Lin, you should think about what crime you've committed by publicly slandering the crown prince. Taking advantage of Lin Nanshu's confusion, the guards from the Eastern Palace rushed forward and rescued her from the city wall. Eunuchs arrived with the imperial guards, conveying the emperor's edict, ordering Lin Nanshu to explain herself before the emperor. Lin Nanshu and I arrived at the Eastern Palace together. Emperor you.Then sat on the main seat, and Princess Huayin had also arrived. The selected beauties were lined up on both sides. When Pei Yuan saw me, the corners of his mouth turned up slightly. After the formalities, Princess Huayin asked with a friendly expression, Miss Lin, why were you dressed in wedding attire and trying to kill yourself on the day of the crown prince's selection of a bride? Is there some injustice you wish to speak of? Tell the emperor, and he will settle it for you. Lin Nanshu wept. Your Majesty, please investigate. On the night of the palace banquet, it was clearly me and the crown prince. She looked as though she had suffered a great injustice and shouted, Shin Qingxi is an impostor. She deceived everyone. Your Majesty. I stepped forward. The one who slandered this maiden was a guard from the Shin family. That person has already been executed by the crown prince himself. Princess Huayin sneered. Of course it wasn't a guard, it was someone even worse than a guard. Bring the witnesses from the Lin family forward. The guards dragged 3 beggars before the emperor. As soon as the 3 beggars appeared, a foul stench filled the air, instantly transporting me back to that filthy night in my past life. My chest churned, and my hands trembled uncontrollably. Like a drowning person struggling to stay afloat, I bit my palm until it bled, finally calming myself enough to stare directly at this filthy group of evildoers. I forced myself to suppress my discomfort, repeatedly reminding myself that this was the pain of my past life, that I had already escaped it, and that I should be free now. But Lin Nanshu's reaction was even more intense than mine. She turned her head and vomited, her face even paler than mine. Those 3 beggars were targeting me. Miss Shin, have you really forgotten how ecstatic you were that night in the alley? Did we 3 serve you well enough? I didn't expect you still had the strength to run off and find the crown prince. Do you look down on us beggars? Their words were filled with insults and false accusations against me. When 3 men speak in unison to slander a woman's chastity, even the most absurd lies are taken by the world as undeniable facts. Pei Yuan erupted in anger. How dare you dare to act so brazenly in the Eastern Palace? I held back the enraged prince and stared at one of the beggars with sores on his limbs, asking Pei Yuan, Your Highness is well versed in medicine. Do you know what kind of rash that beggar has on his hands? Pei Yuan was shocked by my composure and, under my inquisitive gaze, reluctantly answered, It's syphilis. It's contagious. In other words, close contact will cause the same spots to appear. I casually rolled up my sleeve, revealing my flawless, white skin. Such irrefutable evidence spoke louder than any words of denial. The crowd no longer doubted me but instead scolded me for being vulgar. A merchant's daughter, how dare you show your face in public? If I keep dwelling on these trivial details, I might end up being wrongfully accused. I turned to confront Lin Nanshu. Miss Lin, you keep insisting that you were also in the alley that night. Earlier on the city wall, it was proven that you were lying. Now that your slander against me has been exposed, you're full of lies. The one truly trying to frame the Eastern Palace isn't you, is it? Lin Nanshu took a step back, her wedding gown thick and heavy, sleeves covering her palms, and the collar of her neck high and stiff. The more she acted like this, the more suspicious she seemed. I suddenly grabbed Lin Nanshu's arm. Dare you do as I did and roll up your sleeves to prove your innocence? I was slightly taller than her, and from this angle, I could see the faint red rashes beneath the collar that had been covering her neck. The emperor lost patience and sent 2 palace maids to hold Lin Nanshu while they rolled up her layers of sleeves. Sure enough, there was a patch of terrifying red rashes, identical to those on the beggar's body. The person defiled by the beggar in this life had become Lin Nanshu. That night, I kidnapped Pei Yuan and hid him in the woodshed. The beggars didn't find me, but they stumbled upon Lin Nanshu, who had come to search for the prince as planned. These desperate criminals, once their desires took hold, wouldn't even spare a princess or a duke. When I saw Lin Nanshu gagging at the sight of the beggars, I had already guessed the truth. Later, seeing her cover her collar and sleeves tightly, I was even more certain, because in my previous life, I too had been infected with this rash, and Duan Ming had humiliated me after marriage for having a dirty disease. The truth was now clear. Lin Nanshu frantically covered her sleeves, and under the subtle glances of the crowd, she shamefully and desperately pleaded before Princess Huayin. Princess, all of this was your doing. You must take responsibility for me. The princess, however, kicked her away with disgust. You've already slandered the crown prince, now you dare to slander this princess? How heartless Princess Huayin is toward her own daughter. At these words, even the emperor's expression suddenly changed. Lin Nanshu suddenly looked at me. What did you say? Miss Lin, haven't you noticed that you resemble the princess in both your eyebrows and eyes? 15 years ago, the Duke's mansion brought back an infant girl from a suburban villa. And at that time, Princess Huayin was convalescing at the villa. This was the only piece of intelligence the Eastern Palace had uncovered. In truth, it was all just my speculation. Lin Nanshu was only 18 years old, and Princess Huayin was just 30. They could not possibly be mother and daughter. I merely wanted to create more chaos. But at that moment, Emperor you.Then suddenly flew into a rage. Huayin, how dare you abuse your power to interfere in the Eastern Palace's selection of a consort? You have the audacity. Bring them both here. Imprison the princess and Lin Nanshu and confine them to their quarters. Father, what are you afraid of? As if a seal had been broken, the princess shouted aloud in front of everyone. Yes, Lin Nanshu is my biological daughter. Guess who her biological father is? She seemed to have been suppressed for far too long. The slightest mention of it caused her to lose all restraint. Determined to expose everything, with a desperation bordering on madness, the princess stared at the emperor on the throne. 18 years have passed. Has the emperor forgotten everything? The princess's words jolted me awake. Lin Nanshu not only resembled the princess, but her face, upon closer inspection, bore an uncanny resemblance to Emperor you.Then. Emperor you.Then flew into a rage. The princess has gone mad. Cover her mouth. Drag her away. Imprison her for life. The princess continued to ramble incoherently. The eunuchs by the emperor's side obeyed his orders and struck her face with a paddle, drawing blood. Only then did she cease struggling, lifeless like a dead fish. The emperor was clearly enraged. Under the overwhelming might of imperial authority, I found myself in a helpless position. By inadvertently exposing such a scandal, I might as well be as good as dead. But who could have imagined that things would turn out so absurd? The sound of the bamboo paddles striking her face echoed in the air, sending shivers down my spine. Just then, a pair of strong arms wrapped around me, and I looked up in shock. It was Pei Yuan, who had pulled me into his embrace. A protective gesture, regardless of the circumstances. His embrace gave me a sense of security I had never felt before. After the execution, the princess was dragged away, passing by me. Suddenly, she opened her blood-stained lips and asked me, "Does the taste of a celestial being's lust feel good?" When my father used that potion on me, Princess Huayan's eyes turned red, her gaze filled with sorrow and hatred. That year, I was only 10 years old. I finally recalled what Princess Huayan had said to the crown prince in my previous life. She had said, "Your crown princess Lin is the illegitimate child of me and your father." Under the thunderstorm, the crown prince suddenly understood the root of all the tragedies. He had married his own sister, fathered 2 children doomed to die young, and his wife, instigated by the princess, had been poisoning his food daily. His revered father had violated his imperial sister, and he, unaware, had committed incest with his half-sister. Blood relatives were unworthy. Close relatives schemed against him. His wife poisoned him. He suffered the pain of losing 2 children. His body was weak, and he was drained of his last ounce of strength by war. He had done nothing wrong, but everything was pushing him toward death. As Prince Zhao Lin drew his sword to take his own life, Princess Huayan laughed madly in the rain, shouting at Emperor You.Then, who had rushed to the scene. "Father, your most outstanding son has died at the hands of your bastard and me. In this life, everything that drove Pei Yuan to his death was preemptively crushed. But there were still those who suffered." Emperor You.Then wanted to cut out Huayan's tongue to preserve his precarious reputation. Lin Nansnow, who had learned the truth, collapsed to the ground and wept uncontrollably. The court ladies present, witnessing this royal scandal, felt their hearts race with fear and dared not speak a word. Pei Yuan's face turned pale. He clearly could not accept any of this. If it hadn't been me that night, it would have been Lin Nanshu. Then, these sordid truths would have struck the crown prince in the forehead one day in the future, driving him to his death. Fortunately, the great mistake had not yet been made, and everything had been turned around by me. Pei Yuan suddenly embraced me. "I keep having the same dream. In the dream, I'm stabbing myself in the rain, and you rush over and grab the sword. The dream was right. Xin Qingji, you're my savior." Just like in my previous life, the selection of the princess ended abruptly. I became the crown prince's chosen bride. However, the emperor's gaze toward me that day was filled with murderous intent. I spoke words I shouldn't have, endangering the emperor's reputation. No wonder Princess Huayan never married. Perhaps on the night before the selection, she was still the emperor's sole plaything. She lived such a life for nearly 20 years. On that day, the princess was so helpless. Reflecting on it now, I realized that my words were the final straw that broke her, driving her to madness. The emperor intended to kill me. Pei Zhaolin entered the palace and confronted the emperor in the imperial study for an entire day, ultimately securing an imperial edict granting me the title of crown princess. He told me, "The emperor is old. There are some matters he must heed my advice on. Otherwise, who will preserve his reputation after his death?" He used that royal scandal to force Emperor You.Then to submit, safeguarding me and the child in my womb. After all, the future of the great Qi dynasty was in Pei Zhaolin's hands. No longer under the control of the old beast You.Then emperor. On the day I was granted the title of crown princess, the crown prince personally felt my true pregnancy pulse. The princess was certain that it was impossible to have a pregnancy pulse in 10 days, as she had already given birth at the age of 12. Therefore, she knew better than the palace maids that I was lying that day. Now, over a month has passed, and the lie has become truth. Pei Yuan was overjoyed, spinning me around like a top 3 times. The crown prince truly loves children. That is why, in my previous life, after losing 2 children, he was so grief-stricken that it harmed his health. The crown prince is my savior. I and this child will also be the crown prince's saviors. After everything settled, I went to the duke's mansion to see Lin Nanshu. Upon entering the mansion, I discovered that her living quarters had been converted from a woodshed. Princess Huayin hated Emperor you.Then, and naturally hated her daughter who carried his bloodline. She had sent her to the duke's mansion, tacitly allowing them to mistreat this bastard, as if doing so could avenge her beastly father in the weakest years of her life. Once Lin Nanshu came of age, Princess Huayin reappeared in her life as a benefactor, supporting her within the duke's mansion and sending her beautiful clothes and palace pastries. Those who have endured hardship will feel endless gratitude toward anyone who offers them even a small kindness. When the crown prince selected his bride, Lin Nanshu naturally followed the princess's arrangements. She prepared to marry into the Eastern Palace, using poison to destroy the crown prince's body and using those 2 children to torment his mind. Even if it meant harming herself, she didn't care. She believed that as long as she executed everything flawlessly, the princess would love her even more. But in her previous life, she ended up committing suicide by poisoning herself. In this life, what lay before her was the same white silk ribbon that had once been before her in the past. From the age of 4, I knew I was just an outsider living under someone else's roof. The true heiress of the duke's mansion spoiled herself daily at her mother's side. I envied them so much. I longed for a mother by my side. Lin Nanshu clutched the white silk, tilting her head to look at the sunlight streaming through the window. But my mother only saw me as a tool for revenge. Even the night she sent me to that alley, it was she who called those 3 beggars. She smiled bitterly, revealing the red rashes on her skin. She tried to throw the white silk toward the ceiling beam, but I snatched it away. The princess is also a pitiful person. If you must hate, do not hate her alone. If you must hate, hate the emperor on the dragon throne. Hate that beast who raped an innocent girl. Even if our hatred cannot shake the imperial power, you must live on to see the downfall of the wicked. I took the white silk back, dragged Lin Nanshu out of the house, and walked into the sunlight, to the vegetable market at the city gate. There, the execution of the criminals was underway. Those being led to the gallows were the 3 beggars. Those who should be hanged are not you, but them. The Eastern Palace had made arrangements with the Ministry of Justice. So when those 3 beggars were hanged, they suffered far more than other criminals. After witnessing this, Lin Nanshu suddenly said to me, "Those who are hanged die in such a hideous manner, their tongues even stick out." I gave her a prescription for treating venereal sores. Take the medicine as prescribed, and you will be cured within a year. Doctors say this condition is very difficult to treat. Indeed, it was extremely difficult to treat. In my previous life, I had sought out renowned physicians, endured acupuncture and herbal baths for over 2 years before finally finding this miraculous remedy. I have a distant cousin who suffered from the same condition, and she was cured by this prescription. You can use it with confidence. Lin Nanshu couldn't help but show a hint of concern. Your cousin? Her situation is similar to yours. But she's doing well now. So you shouldn't give up. You saw how ugly it is to be strangled to death. Lin Nanshu looked at me in confusion. Why are you helping me? I countered, we're both women, why wouldn't I help? In the sunlight. She paused, then smiled at me. On the day Lin Nanshu left the capital, the people from the princess's mansion gave her a small wooden box containing Princess Huayin's private possessions from over the years. The princess, confined to her quarters, felt guilty toward her daughter at some point. So before she completely lost her mind, she used her last shred of sanity to transfer all her private possessions to Lin Nanshu. Let her go to Jiangnan to find her own place in the world. 3 years later, Emperor you.Then fell seriously ill. By his deathbed, Pei Yuan smoothly inherited the imperial power and the throne. As he took the imperial seal, Pei Yuan coldly ordered the still-breathing Emperor you.Then, announced to the world that the emperor has passed away. Emperor you.Then looked at Pei Yuan, this so-called filial son, in shock. Everyone knew that Prince Zhaolin was a model of loyalty and filial piety. No one could have imagined he would do such a thing. He dismissed everyone from the Jinda palace. Now I am the new master of the harem, and all matters behind the scenes are under my command. Therefore, when Princess Huayin disguised herself as a palace maid and entered the Jinda palace in broad daylight, no one noticed. Emperor you.Then was clinging to life. But suddenly a white silk ribbon wrapped around his neck, followed by a suffocating sensation as his neck bone snapped. He struggled with his hands. His eyes rolled back, and he saw Huayin's pale yet beautiful face with terror. The princess had been secretly strangled to death in a separate courtyard 3 years ago by Emperor you.Then's orders. But the emperor did not know that his most favored crown prince had been disobeying him, allowing the princess to fake her death and escape. I hid the princess in the suburbs of the capital for 3 years. All for this moment. The white silk became Huayin's weapon as she strangled the emperor, cruelly teasing him. Husband, it hurts a little. Bear with it. You always used to comfort Huayin like this in bed. She suddenly changed her expression, becoming as innocent and cruel as a child. Father, you have violated the principles of chastity and morality, committing incest. Your daughter will now send you on your way to fulfill her filial duty. The emperor was nominally dead, so no one interfered with the execution. At dawn, Emperor you.Then was placed in his coffin, his neck wrapped in the white silk, which had already been tightened until his bones were exposed. He had established the law: those who violated chastity and morality should be executed by strangulation. But this law should not only apply to women. He himself should also die under such a law. The mad Princess Huayin emerged from the Jinda hall, her hands stained with the blood of the late emperor, her face bearing a rare calmness. She smiled at me and Pei Yuan with a sense of relief. At dawn, Huayin passed away peacefully in the suburbs of the capital. It seemed as though she had lived only for this one night. Once the potion took effect, even a god without desires would become a slave to primal instincts. But I knew better. I couldn't stand by and watch an innocent, pure-hearted person be driven mad by cruelty, only to have her tormentors stand in judgment over her with righteous indignation. Coincidentally, Pei Yuan shared my thoughts. Therefore, I gave her a peaceful end, allowed her to fulfill her revenge, and let her depart in peace and tranquility. Pei Zhao ascended the throne as emperor, and on the same day, I was crowned empress. The century-long prosperous era of the Great Qi dynasty was about to begin. Pei Yuan knew what I intended to do. The phoenix seal he gave me carried real authority. Upon ascending the throne, I issued my first imperial edict as empress. I proclaimed to all the people of the Great Qi dynasty: those who force a woman to commit suicide after she loses her virginity shall have their lovers executed on the spot. And those who instigate such acts shall be considered accomplices and exiled 3,000 miles away. Those who violate young girls shall be handed over to the Ministry of Justice, castrated, and executed. Throughout history, those who should be executed by white silk have never been the victims, but the perpetrators. As the mother of a nation, what I must sever are the countless invisible white silk ribbons that shroud the necks of women.